The comet had been invisible for centuries, a celestial wanderer lost in the vastness of space. But on a crisp autumn night, it returned, its fiery tail slicing through the darkness like a blade. The first to see it was a young astronomer named Elara, who had spent years studying the skies from her isolated observatory on the edge of the Blackwood Forest. She had been tracking a cluster of distant stars when her telescope caught the faint glimmer of the comet. At first, she thought it was a trick of the light, a reflection, or a flaw in her lens. But as she adjusted the focus, the truth became undeniable. The comet was real, and it was heading straight for Earth. Elara's heart raced as she scribbled down the coordinates, her hands trembling with excitement. She had read about this comet in ancient texts, a harbinger of change said to bring visions to those who gazed upon it. The legends were vague, filled with warnings and prophecies, but Elara had always dismissed them as superstition. Now, as she stared at the comet's glowing core, she felt a strange pull, as if it were calling to her. She rushed to her computer, typing furiously to alert the astronomical community. But as she hit send, a wave of dizziness washed over her. The room seemed to spin, and her vision blurred. She clutched the edge of her desk, trying to steady herself, but the sensation only grew stronger. Suddenly, she was no longer in the observatory. She was standing on a barren plain, the sky above her a swirling mass of colors she couldn't name. The air was thick with the scent of ozone, and the ground beneath her feet vibrated with a low, resonant hum. Before her stood a figure, tall and cloaked in shadow. Its face was obscured, but she could feel its gaze piercing through her. "The comet is a key," it said, its voice echoing in her mind. "A key to what lies beyond. But beware, for not all visions are meant to be seen." Elara tried to speak, to ask what it meant, but the figure vanished as quickly as it had appeared. The plane dissolved, and she was back in the observatory, her heart pounding in her chest. She looked at the clock. Only a few seconds had passed. But the experience felt like an eternity. She sat down, her mind racing. Was it a hallucination? A side effect of exhaustion? Or had the comet truly shown her something beyond the realm of science? She didn't know, but one thing was certain: she couldn't ignore what she had seen. The comet was more than just a celestial object. It was a gateway, and she had been given a glimpse of what lay on the other side. As the night wore on, Elara continued to monitor the comet, her thoughts consumed by the vision. She knew she had to share her discovery, but she also knew that not everyone would believe her. The scientific community would demand proof, and she had none. All she had was a feeling, a deep, unshakable certainty that the comet was more than it seemed. By dawn, the comet was visible to the naked eye, a faint streak of light in the eastern sky. Elara stood outside the observatory, her breath visible in the cold morning air. She watched as the comet grew brighter, its tail stretching across the heavens. And as she gazed at it, she felt that same pull, that same sense of connection. The comet was calling to her, and she knew she couldn't resist its call. But she also knew that she couldn't face it alone. She needed help, someone who could understand what she had seen and help her unravel the mystery. She thought of her old mentor, Dr. Marcus Hale, a renowned astrophysicist who had retired years ago. He had always been open to the idea that there was more to the universe than what could be measured and quantified. If anyone would believe her, it would be him. Elara packed a bag, her mind made up. She would find Dr. Hale and tell him everything. Together, they would uncover the truth about the comet and the visions it brought. But as she set out on her journey, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was stepping into something far bigger than she could imagine. The comet was just the beginning, and the visions were only the first clue. Elara's journey to find Dr. Marcus Hale took her to the remote coastal town of Windmere, a place where the old man had retreated after his retirement. The town was a labyrinth of narrow cobblestone streets, weathered cottages, and the ever-present sound of crashing waves. It was a place where time seemed to stand still, and the outside world felt like a distant memory. Elara had always wondered why Hale had chosen such an isolated place to spend his final years, but now, as she walked through the misty streets, she began to understand. There was a stillness here, a quietude that allowed the mind to wander into realms beyond the tangible. She found Hale's cottage at the edge of town, perched on a cliff overlooking the sea. The house was small and unassuming, its wooden walls bleached by the salt air. As she approached, she noticed a telescope on the porch, its lens pointed toward the sky. Hale was sitting beside it, wrapped in a thick woolen blanket, his eyes fixed on the horizon. He didn't seem surprised to see her. "I knew you'd come," he said, his voice gravelly but warm. "The comet, isn't it?" Elara nodded, her throat tight with emotion. She hadn't realized how much she had missed him until that moment. Hale had always been more than a mentor to her. He had been a kindred spirit, someone who understood her insatiable curiosity and her need to explore the unknown. She sat down beside him, and for a long time they simply watched the waves crash against the rocks below. Finally, Elara broke the silence. "I saw something, Marcus. Something I can't explain." Hale turned to her, his eyes sharp and inquisitive. "Tell me." She recounted her vision in detail, from the barren plain to the shadowy figure and its cryptic warning. Hale listened intently, his expression unreadable. When she finished, he leaned back in his chair, his gaze returning to the sea. "I've been waiting for this," he said quietly. "For years I've felt it coming. The comet, the visions, they're not new, Elara. They've happened before." Elara's breath caught in her throat. "What do you mean?" Hale stood and motioned for her to follow him inside. The cottage was cluttered with books, maps, and strange artifacts, remnants of a lifetime spent chasing the mysteries of the universe. He led her to a dusty old trunk in the corner and opened it, revealing a stack of yellow journals and loose papers. "These are my notes," he said, lifting one of the journals and handing it to her. "From when I was your age. I saw the comet too, Elara. Or at least, I saw its predecessor." Elara's hands trembled as she flipped through the pages. The journal was filled with sketches of the comet, detailed observations, and accounts of strange visions. Hale had seen the same barren plain, the same swirling sky. But his vision had been different in one crucial way. He had seen a city, a vast, shimmering metropolis that seemed to exist outside of time. "I thought I was going mad," Hale admitted. "I spent years trying to understand what I had seen. I traveled the world, consulted with experts, even delved into ancient texts. But the more I learned, the more I realized that the comet is not just a physical phenomenon. It's a bridge, Elara. A bridge between our world and something else." Elara's mind raced as she absorbed his words. "But what is it? Another dimension? A parallel universe?" Hale shook his head. "I don't know. But I do know this: the comet is selective. It doesn't reveal itself to everyone. Only to those who are open. Those who are willing to see beyond the veil." Elara thought of the shadowy figure and its warning. "You said you've been waiting for this. What did you mean?" Hale's expression grew solemn. "The comet's return was foretold in the ancient texts. It said that when it appears, it heralds a time of great change. A time when the boundaries between worlds will weaken and the visions will become more frequent. But it's also a time of danger. Not everyone who sees the comet is prepared for what it reveals." Elara felt a chill run down her spine. "What kind of danger?" Hale hesitated, as if weighing his words carefully. "The visions can be overwhelming. Some people lose themselves in them, unable to distinguish between what's real and what's not. Others are driven mad by what they see. And then there are those who seek to exploit the comet's power for their own gain." Elara thought of the scientific community, of the governments and corporations that would stop at nothing to harness such a phenomenon. "We have to do something," she said. "We can't let this fall into the wrong hands." Hale nodded. "That's why I've been waiting for you. You're the only one I trust to carry on this work. But you must be careful, Elara. The comet's power is not to be taken lightly." As the sun dipped below the horizon, Hale and Elara sat by the fire, poring over his journals and discussing their next steps. They decided to reach out to a small group of trusted colleagues, scientists, historians, and mystics who might have insights into the comet's nature. But even as they made their plans, Elara couldn't shake the feeling that they were racing against time. The comet was growing brighter with each passing night, and its pull on her was becoming harder to resist. That night, as she lay in the guest room, Elara had another vision. This time, she was standing in the shimmering city Hale had described. The buildings were made of light, their forms shifting and flowing like liquid. The air was filled with a low, melodic hum, and the streets were alive with movement, shapes that were almost human but not quite. She felt a sense of awe and wonder, but also a deep, primal fear. This place was beautiful, but it was not meant for her. As she wandered through the city, she came upon a great tower, its spire reaching into the heavens. At its base stood the shadowy figure from her first vision. It turned to her, its face still obscured, and spoke in a voice that echoed through her very soul. "You are not ready," it said. "But you must be. The gate is opening and the key is in your hands." Before she could respond, the vision faded and she was back in the cottage, her heart pounding. She knew then that the comet was more than just a scientific curiosity. It was a test, a challenge that would push her to the limits of her understanding. And she knew that she couldn't face it alone. The next morning, she and Hale set out on their journey, their minds filled with questions and their hearts heavy with the weight of what lay ahead. The comet was calling, and they had no choice but to answer. Elara and Hale spent the next few days reaching out to their network of trusted contacts. They sent encrypted messages, made discreet phone calls, and arranged meetings in secluded locations. Their goal was to assemble a team of individuals who could help them unravel the mystery of the comet and its visions. Among those they contacted were Dr. Priya Mehta, a quantum physicist with a penchant for the metaphysical, Father Thomas Byrne, a Jesuit priest and scholar of ancient texts, and Lila Chin, a neuroscientist specializing in altered states of consciousness. Each of them had encountered the comet in some way, whether through visions, dreams, or inexplicable phenomena. The group agreed to meet at an abandoned monastery high in the mountains, a place far removed from prying eyes. The monastery, known as St. Elard's, had been built centuries ago by a secretive order of monks who believed in the existence of otherworldly realms. Its thick stone walls and remote location made it the perfect sanctuary for their work. Elara and Hale arrived first, their car winding up the narrow, treacherous road that led to the monastery. The air grew colder as they ascended, and the landscape became more barren, the trees giving way to jagged rocks and patches of snow. When they finally reached the monastery, they were greeted by a towering stone archway, its surface covered in intricate carvings of celestial bodies and strange symbols. "This place feels alive," Elara said as they stepped inside the courtyard. The air was thick with the scent of moss and damp stone, and the silence was almost oppressive. She couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Hale nodded. The monks who built this place believed it was a gateway. They thought that certain locations on Earth were more attuned to the energies of the cosmos. This was one of them. Over the next few hours, the rest of the group arrived. Dr. Mehta was the first, her sharp eyes scanning the monastery with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. Father Byrne followed, his calm demeanor a stark contrast to the tension that hung in the air. Lila Chan was the last to arrive, her arrival heralded by the sound of her motorcycle engine echoing through the mountains. Once everyone had settled in, they gathered in the monastery's great hall, a cavernous room lit by the flickering light of a fire. The walls were lined with ancient tapestries depicting scenes of celestial events, and the air was filled with the faint scent of incense. Elara began by recounting her experiences with the comet, her voice steady but tinged with emotion. She described the visions, the shadowy figure, and the sense of urgency that had driven her to seek out Hale. When she finished, the room was silent, the weight of her words hanging in the air. Dr. Mehta was the first to speak. "What you're describing aligns with some of the theories I've been working on. The idea that the universe is not just a physical construct but a multidimensional one. The comet could be a kind of puncture, a point where the boundaries between dimensions are weakened." Father Byrne nodded thoughtfully. There are ancient texts that speak of similar phenomena. The Book of Enoch, for example, describes wandering stars that bring visions and revelations. The comet could be one of these. Lila Chin leaned forward, her expression intense. "But what about the psychological aspect? If the comet is causing these visions, we need to understand how it's affecting the brain. Are these experiences real, or are they hallucinations? And if they're real, what does that mean for our understanding of consciousness?" The group spent hours discussing these questions, their conversation ranging from the scientific to the spiritual. They debated the nature of reality, the limits of human perception, and the possibility of other dimensions. As the night wore on, they began to piece together a theory. The comet was not just a physical object but a catalyst, a force that could unlock hidden aspects of the mind and the universe. But even as they made progress, Elara couldn't shake the feeling that they were missing something. The shadowy figure's warning echoed in her mind. "The gate is opening and the key is in your hands." What did it mean? And what was the gate? As the fire burned low, the group decided to take a break and reconvene in the morning. Elara retreated to her room, a small cell with a narrow window that looked out over the mountains. She lay down on the hard cot, her mind racing. Sleep seemed impossible, but eventually exhaustion overtook her. That night, she had another vision. This time, she was standing in a vast, dark space, the ground beneath her feet cold and smooth. In the distance, she could see a faint light pulsing like a heartbeat. As she moved toward it, she realized it was a door, its surface covered in the same symbols she had seen carved into the monastery's archway. The door was slightly ajar, and from within, she could hear a low, resonant hum. She reached out to push the door open, but before she could, a hand grabbed her wrist. She turned to see the shadowy figure, its face still obscured. "Not yet," it said. "You are not ready." Elara woke with a start, her heart pounding. The room was dark, but she could see the faint light of dawn creeping through the window. She sat up, her mind racing. The door in her vision, was it the gate the figure had spoken of? And if so, what lay beyond it? She dressed quickly and went to find Hale. He was already awake, sitting in the courtyard with a cup of tea. She told him about her vision, and he listened intently, his expression grave. "The symbols on the door," he said when she finished. "They're the same as the ones on the monastery's archway. I think this place is connected to the gate, Elara. The monks who built it must have known something." Elara felt a surge of excitement. "If we can decipher the symbols, maybe we can find out how to open the gate. Or at least, how to prepare for what's on the other side." Hale nodded. "We'll need to examine the carvings more closely. And we'll need to be careful. If the gate is as powerful as the visions suggest, we can't afford to make a mistake." As the rest of the group began to stir, Elara and Hale shared their discovery. The team spent the day studying the carvings, using their combined knowledge to decipher the symbols. It was slow, painstaking work, but by evening they had made progress. The symbols seemed to describe a ritual, a series of steps that could be used to open the gate. But there was a warning as well: the gate could only be opened by someone who was truly ready, someone who had faced their deepest fears and embraced the unknown. Elara knew then that the Comet's visions were not just glimpses of another world, they were a test, a preparation for what lay ahead. And she knew that she would have to face her own fears if she wanted to unlock the gate's secrets. As the sun set behind the mountains, the group gathered in the great hall once more. The fire crackled in the hearth, casting flickering shadows on the walls. Elara looked around at the faces of her companions, each of them united by a shared purpose. They were no longer just a group of scientists and scholars. They were explorers venturing into uncharted territory. "We're close," she said, her voice steady. "But the hardest part is yet to come. The gate is real and it's calling to us. But we have to be ready. All of us." The others nodded, their expressions resolute. They knew the risks, but they also knew that they couldn't turn back. The Comet had chosen them, and they had no choice but to answer its call. The team spent the next few days preparing for the ritual described in the carvings. The symbols had provided a detailed set of instructions, but they were cryptic and open to interpretation. The ritual required specific alignments of celestial bodies, the use of certain herbs and crystals, and a state of mental and spiritual readiness. It was clear that the monks who had designed the ritual had intended it to be a profound and transformative experience. Elara took the lead in organizing the preparations. She and Dr. Mehta worked together to calculate the precise timing of the ritual, which needed to coincide with the Comet's closest approach to Earth. Father Byrne and Lila Chun focused on gathering the necessary materials, including rare herbs from the monastery's overgrown garden and crystals that matched the descriptions in the carvings. Hale, meanwhile, delved deeper into the monastery's archives, searching for any additional clues that might help them understand the ritual's purpose. As the day of the ritual approached, the atmosphere in the monastery grew tense. The comet was now a constant presence in the sky, its tail stretching across the heavens like a luminous bridge. Its light cast an eerie glow over the mountains, and the air seemed to hum with an almost imperceptible vibration. Elara could feel the comet's pull growing stronger, as if it were drawing her closer to the edge of something vast and unknowable. On the night of the ritual, the team gathered in the monastery's inner sanctum, a circular chamber with a domed ceiling. The walls were covered in more carvings, and the floor was inlaid with a mosaic depicting the comet and its tail. In the center of the room was a stone altar upon which they had placed the herbs, crystals, and other items required for the ritual. Elara stood before the altar, her heart pounding. She had volunteered to be the one to perform the ritual, knowing that her connection to the comet made her the most likely candidate. The others formed a circle around her, their presence a source of comfort and strength. "Remember," Hale said, his voice calm but firm, "this is not just about opening the gate. It's about understanding what lies beyond. Stay focused, but don't be afraid to let go." Elara nodded, taking a deep breath. She lit the herbs, their smoke curling upward in intricate patterns. The scent was sharp and earthy, filling the room with a sense of ancient power. She placed the crystals in a specific arrangement on the altar, their surfaces catching the light of the comet and reflecting it in dazzling patterns. As she began to chant the words inscribed in the carvings, the room seemed to come alive. The carvings on the walls glowed faintly, and the mosaic on the floor shimmered as if lit from within. The air grew thick with energy, and Elara felt a strange sensation as if she were being lifted off the ground. She closed her eyes, letting the words flow through her, their meaning transcending language. Suddenly, she was no longer in the sanctum. She was standing in the vast, dark space from her vision, the door before her pulsing with light. The shadowy figure was there too, its presence both comforting and terrifying. "You were closer," it said, its voice echoing in her mind. But the gate is not just a physical construct. It is a test of your will, your courage, and your understanding. Are you ready to face what lies beyond? Elara hesitated, her mind filled with doubt. What if she wasn't strong enough? What if the gate led to something she couldn't handle? But then she thought of her companions, of the trust they had placed in her, and of the journey that had brought her to this moment. She knew she couldn't turn back. "I'm ready," she said, her voice steady. The figure nodded and the door began to open. A blinding light poured through and Elara felt herself being pulled forward. She stepped through the door and the world around her dissolved into a kaleidoscope of colors and shapes. She was no longer in the dark space but in a realm that defied description. The ground beneath her feet was soft and shifting like liquid light, and the sky above was a swirling mass of stars and galaxies. In the distance, she could see the shimmering city from Hale's vision, its towers reaching into the heavens. But as she moved toward the city, she felt a growing sense of unease. The beauty of the place was undeniable, but there was something beneath the surface, something dark and primal. She realized then that this realm was not just a place of wonder, it was a place of duality where light and shadow existed in perfect balance. As she reached the city's gates, she was met by a figure unlike any she had ever seen. It was tall and luminous, its form constantly shifting as if it were made of pure energy. Its voice was a symphony of sounds, both familiar and alien. "Welcome, Seeker," it said. "You have passed the first test. But the journey is far from over. The gate you have opened is but one of many, and the path ahead is fraught with peril. Are you prepared to continue?" Elara felt a surge of determination. She had come this far, and she knew she couldn't stop now. "I am," she said. The figure nodded, and the city's gates began to open. But before Elara could step inside, she felt a sudden jolt as if she were being pulled back. The realm around her began to dissolve, and she found herself back in the sanctum, gasping for breath. The others rushed to her side, their faces filled with concern. "What happened?" Hale asked. "Did you see it? Did you open the gate?" Elara nodded, still trying to process what she had experienced. "I did, but it's not what we thought. The gate is just the beginning. There's so much more, and it's not all good." The team spent the rest of the night discussing Elara's vision, trying to make sense of what she had seen. It was clear that the comet's power was far greater than they had imagined, and that the gate was only the first step in a much larger journey. As the first light of dawn crept through the monastery's windows, Elara felt a sense of both excitement and trepidation. She knew that the path ahead would be difficult, but she also knew that she couldn't turn back. The comet had chosen her, and she was determined to see this through to the end. Elara's vision of the shimmering city lingered in her mind like a vivid dream, its beauty and mystery impossible to shake. The team spent the next few days analyzing her experience, trying to piece together what it meant. The city, the luminous figure, the sense of duality, it all pointed to something far beyond their understanding. But one thing was clear. The gate was not just a doorway to another realm. It was a threshold to a deeper truth about the universe and their place within it. As they prepared for the next phase of their journey, Elara couldn't help but feel a growing sense of urgency. The comet was now at its brightest, its light casting an otherworldly glow over the monastery. The air seemed charged with energy, and the visions were becoming more frequent, not just for Elara but for the entire team. Dr. Mehta reported seeing fleeting glimpses of mathematical equations that seemed to describe the fabric of reality itself. Father Burns spoke of hearing a celestial choir, its harmonies resonating with the vibrations of the cosmos. Even Lila Chun, the most grounded of the group, admitted to feeling a strange pull, as if her consciousness were expanding beyond the limits of her body. The team decided to focus their efforts on understanding the Shimmering City. According to Elara's vision, it was the key to unlocking the comet's secrets. But how could they reach it? The gate had only opened for a moment, and Elara had been pulled back before she could fully explore the city. They needed a way to stabilize the connection, to ensure that they could cross over and return safely. Hale suggested using the monastery's carvings as a guide. The symbols not only described the ritual, but also hinted at a deeper connection between the monastery and the city. He theorized that the monks had built the monastery as a kind of anchor, a physical representation of the gate that could be used to bridge the gap between worlds. If we can amplify the ritual, Hale said, we might be able to create a stable portal, but it will require more than just herbs and crystals. We'll need to tap into the energy of the comet itself. The team set to work using their combined knowledge to modify the ritual. Dr. Mehta designed a device that could harness the comet's light, focusing it into a beam that could be directed at the altar. Father Byrne and Lila Chun worked together to refine the chants and meditative practices, ensuring that the participants' minds were fully aligned with the ritual's purpose. Elara, meanwhile, focused on preparing herself mentally and emotionally. She knew that she would be the one to cross over again, and she needed to be ready for whatever lay ahead. On the night of the second ritual, the team gathered in the sanctum once more. The atmosphere was electric, the air thick with anticipation. The comet's light streamed through the narrow windows, casting the room in an ethereal glow. Elara stood before the altar, her heart pounding but her mind clear. She knew that this was the moment they had been working toward. As the ritual began, the room seemed to come alive. The carvings on the walls glowed brighter than ever, and the mosaic on the floor pulsed with light. Dr. Mehta activated the device, and a beam of comet light struck the altar, illuminating the crystals and herbs. Elara began to chant, her voice steady and strong. The others joined in, their voices blending into a harmonious resonance. Once again, Elara felt herself being lifted, her consciousness expanding beyond the physical realm. The door appeared before her, its light even brighter than before. This time, she stepped through without hesitation, the luminous figure waiting for her on the other side. You have returned, it said, its voice a symphony of sound and light. The city awaits. Elara followed the figure through the shimmering landscape, her senses overwhelmed by the beauty and strangeness of the place. The city was even more magnificent up close, its towers made of light and its streets alive with movement. But as she drew closer, she noticed something unsettling. The city was not static. It was constantly shifting, its forms and structures changing in response to her thoughts and emotions. It was as if the city were a reflection of her own mind. The luminous figure led her to a central plaza where a great fountain of light rose into the sky. Around the fountain were other figures, each one unique and radiant. They seemed to be waiting for her, their presence both welcoming and intimidating. You have come far, one of the figures said, its voice resonating with a deep, ancient wisdom. But the journey is not yet complete. The city is a mirror, a place where the boundaries between self and universe dissolve. To understand its secrets, you must first understand yourself. Elara felt a surge of emotion as the figure's words sank in. She realized that the city was not just a physical place. It was a manifestation of the collective consciousness, a realm where thoughts and emotions took on tangible form. To navigate it, she would need to confront her deepest fears and desires, to embrace the duality within herself. As she wandered through the city, she encountered visions of her past, her present, and her possible futures. She saw moments of joy and sorrow, of triumph and failure. She saw the people she loved and the choices she had made. And she saw the shadowy figure from her earlier visions, its presence a constant reminder of the challenges she had yet to face. Finally, she reached the heart of the city, a towering spire of light that seemed to stretch into infinity. At its base was a door, its surface covered in the same symbols as the monastery's carvings. She knew that this was the final test, the moment of truth. As she reached out to open the door, the shadowy figure appeared once more. "Are you ready?" it asked. Elara took a deep breath, her mind clear and her heart steady. "I am." The door opened, and she stepped through, into a realm of pure light and energy. She felt herself dissolving, becoming one with the universe. And in that moment, she understood. The comet, the gate, the city, it was all part of a greater whole, a cosmic dance of creation and destruction, of light and shadow. She was not just an observer. She was a participant, a thread in the fabric of existence. When she returned to the sanctum, the others were waiting, their faces filled with awe and relief. She knew that she had changed, that the experience had transformed her in ways she couldn't yet fully comprehend. But she also knew that the journey was far from over. The comet's light still shone in the sky, and the gate remained open, a portal to infinite possibilities. Elara's return from the Shimmering City marked a turning point for the team. Her experience had deepened their understanding of the comet's power and the nature of the gate. It was no longer just a scientific mystery or a spiritual quest. It was a profound realization that they were part of something much larger than themselves. The city was a reflection of the interconnectedness of all things, a place where the boundaries between self and universe dissolved. And the comet was the key to unlocking that understanding. But with this realization came a new challenge. The gate was still open, and the comet's light continued to grow brighter. The team knew that they couldn't keep the gate stable indefinitely. The energy required to maintain the connection was immense, and the strain was beginning to show. The monastery's walls seemed to hum with a low, resonant vibration, and the air was thick with the scent of ozone. It was as if the very fabric of reality was being stretched to its limits. Hale was the first to voice their concerns. "We can't keep this up forever," he said, his voice tense. "The gate is a bridge, but bridges can collapse. If we don't find a way to stabilize it or close it, we risk causing irreparable damage." Dr. Mehta nodded, her expression grim. "The energy readings are off the charts. If the gate destabilizes, it could create a rift, a tear in the fabric of spacetime. The consequences would be catastrophic." Elara listened quietly, her mind racing. She knew they were right, but she also knew that the gate was more than just a physical phenomenon. It was a symbol, a manifestation of the cosmic dance she had witnessed in the city. To close it would be to sever a connection that had taken centuries, perhaps millennia, to form. But to leave it open was to risk unleashing forces they couldn't control. "We need to find a balance," she said finally. "A way to honor the gate's purpose without letting it consume us." The team spent the next few days working tirelessly to find a solution. They pored over the monastery's carvings, analyzed the energy readings, and debated the philosophical implications of their discovery. It was Father Byrne who suggested a possible path forward. "The gate is a threshold," he said, "but it's also a mirror. It reflects our understanding of the universe and our place within it. If we can align ourselves with its purpose, if we can embrace the duality of light and shadow, we might be able to stabilize it." Elara felt a spark of hope. Father Byrne's words resonated with her experience in the city. The gate wasn't just a doorway, it was a test, a challenge to transcend the limitations of the physical world and embrace the interconnectedness of all things. If they could do that, they might be able to find a way to coexist with the gate without destroying it. The team decided to perform one final ritual, not to open or close the gate, but to harmonize with it. They gathered in the sanctum once more, their hearts and minds united in purpose. Elara stood at the center, her connection to the comet stronger than ever. As the ritual began, she felt the familiar pull, the sense of being lifted beyond the physical realm. But this time, she didn't resist. She let go, allowing herself to become one with the cosmic dance. The gate responded, its light pulsing in rhythm with her heartbeat. The others joined in, their voices blending into a harmonious resonance that filled the room. The carvings on the walls glowed brighter than ever, and the mosaic on the floor seemed to come alive, its patterns shifting and flowing like liquid light. As the ritual reached its climax, Elara felt a profound sense of peace. She understood now that the gate was not something to be feared or controlled. It was a part of the universe, a reminder of the infinite possibilities that lay beyond the veil. And she understood that her role was not to master it, but to honor it, to embrace its mysteries and learn from its lessons. When the ritual ended, the gate was still open, but its light was softer, more stable. The air in the sanctum was calm, and the hum of energy had subsided. The team knew that they had succeeded, not in closing the gate, but in finding a way to coexist with it. As they stepped outside, the comet's light bathed the mountains in an ethereal glow. It was a reminder of the journey they had undertaken and the discoveries they had made. But it was also a reminder of the challenges that lay ahead. The gate was a threshold, and the path beyond it was infinite. Elara looked up at the sky, her heart filled with a sense of wonder and gratitude. She knew that the journey was far from over, but she also knew that they were ready. The comet had chosen them, and they had answered its call. Together, they had glimpsed the cosmic dance, and they would carry its lessons with them, wherever the path led.